Eat like a king who's on a budget. 3 tasty options, fries, drink, and nuggets. All for $5. Wait, that can't be right. Just confirm that that's the real price. BK, have it your way.
Welcome into Leather Brains, your host, Slapdog. And before we do today's episode, we have to give a shout out to our sponsor. So let's talk about the most important part of your Sunday lineup. We've all been there. It's the late window. Your team just turned it over and you're starving. That is where our friends at Burger King come in. Whether you're celebrating a Jags upset or mourning a Lions heartbreaker, nothing hits like a flame-grilled Whopper. It's the official fuel of this podcast, so do yourself a favor, ladies and gentlemen. Grab the Burger King app, find those $3.99 Whopper Wednesday deals, and remember, at Burger King, you rule. Have it your way. Now, as I mentioned, I'm your host, Slapdog, and you will notice here today, I am completely alone. It is just me here, and we are going to have a roaring hell of a time discussing this week in the NFL. So, welcome back to Leather Brains. Pull the car over, turn the volume up, and take a deep breath because the NFL just spent the last 48 hours setting the 2025 season on fire. We entered Week 16 looking for clarity, but all we got was chaos. It was absolutely nuts. In the AFC, the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't just beat the Denver Broncos. They walked into the mile-high altitude and took the crown, proving that the road to the Super Bowl might just run through Duval. In the NFC, the oldest rivalry in football gave us an overtime heart-stopper that might have just ended the Green Bay Packers season while punching the Chicago Bears ticket to the dance, baby. Bear down. As a Bears podcast, we were so excited to see this, but the story everyone is texting about this morning is the Motor City Meltdown. 2 flags, 2 erased touchdowns, and a Lions playoff dream that went up in smoke in the final seconds against Pittsburgh. Was it a fair whistle, or did the refs just decide the NFC wildcard race themselves? Today, we're going to be breaking down the fallout of Lamar Jackson's injury, Josh Allen's historic climb into the record books, and the updated playoff picture that looks absolutely nothing like it did on Friday. It's Week 16. It's the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen, and it starts right now. So here's what we're going to do. As I mentioned, it's just me today. I'm not going to touch on every single game, but I'm going to be touching on the storylines, what is going on in the NFL. The playoff picture is certainly a huge topic of conversation, so I'm going to delve into all that. I'm going to give you my unbiased thoughts and opinions on some of these games, some of the players, what is going on in the NFL space. I appreciate you joining me, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to say this as well. For those of you who are tuning in live, leave a comment. Go join us on YouTube, X, Instagram, wherever you might be. Leave your comments at the video and join me in the conversation. I would love your thoughts and opinions on everything that I'm going to be talking about today. So come join the conversation live. Leave your comments. I will throw it up here on the screen, and we will be discussing what you have to say live here on the show. With all of that being said, let's jump in, baby. So there were several teams that punched their tickets to the dance this week, namely the Patriots, the Bears, bear down, 49ers, and the Eagles have all clinched playoff spots. So it is firmly cemented that these teams will be going to the playoffs this year. NFC South drama. The Panthers have now taken control of the division after the Buccaneers lost to Atlanta. This is now Carolina's position to lose. And then the AFC North race, Pittsburgh now leads Baltimore by not 1 game, but 2 games, and they can clinch the division as early as next week. So we're going to be jumping into it. We're going to start with Duval, because I have talked a lot of crap on Trevor Lawrence, but guys, this was a statement game of the year. I mean, the Jaguars went into one of the most hostile environments in the league, and they snapped Denver's 11-game winning streak. Like, that's insane that Denver was winning 11 games. I didn't even realize that until I was sitting here getting all these stats and notes ready for this game. They'd won 11 games in a row. And it wasn't just a win. It was really like a dismantling of the AFC's top seeds. So I was really surprised by this. I had the Broncos winning this game, but you can't talk about this game and not talk about Trevor Lawrence and his elite. Call it an ascension, call it luck. I really don't know what I would label this as, because I have been very vocal on this show that I am not a fan of Trevor Lawrence, but he was on an absolute heater in this game. He finished the game 23 for 36 for 279 yards and 4 total touchdowns, 3 of which were passing and 1 were rushing. And over the last 4 games, he's had 12 passing touchdowns with 0 interceptions. I think this performance against, Denver is a top-tier defense, and it really makes me question everything about this league. I have been very, very vocal about Trevor Lawrence, about the fact that I don't think he's a good quarterback, that I think that the problem for me has always been consistency. And over these last 4 games, really, I really don't know what to label Trevor Lawrence as. And a lot of people are starting to have conversations about him in the top 5 quarterback conversation. I'm not ready to do that, and I'm not willing to do that because I've seen Trevor Lawrence over the last 4 years not be able to get it done, not be able to prove himself as an elite upper echelon quarterback. And to be quite honest with you, and I've said this on the show many times as well, I don't think that the Jaguars should have paid him that money. And I think a lot of Jaguars fans don't think that they should have paid him that money. I'm still not in the camp that I think Trevor Lawrence is the next thing since sliced bread. Where I'm looking at this Jaguars team and I'm looking at what they're doing, you have to talk about Trevor Lawrence, and I am talking about Trevor Lawrence, but you can't not also talk about Liam Cohen and what he has done for this organization. I think Liam Cohen has done a phenomenal job from a coaching perspective of really rallying this team, setting them up in positions to win. And while I was watching the Jaguars this season, you could see that over and over again. And there were a lot of times, especially in the earlier on in the season, when I'm watching these Jaguars games and I'm sitting here looking at the fact that they're winning games, but I don't think they were winning games because of Trevor Lawrence. I think they were winning games despite Trevor Lawrence's poor play. But over these last 4 weeks, I know Trevor Lawrence is a veteran listener of this podcast. He's really taken what we're having to say to heart, and I think it's certainly showing in these last 4 weeks what he has been able to do. Now, I'm not ready to sit here and like I said, there are a lot of people that are starting to chatter about Trevor Lawrence being in the top 5 conversation. I am not ready to do that because, as I mentioned, the consistency has been the biggest issue for me. I've seen it in a small window, and there to add on to the argument for people saying Trevor Lawrence is great. You look at his situation, you look at what Trevor Lawrence has gone through. It's been a coaching carousel. It's been constant turnover with this Jaguars team. And that's really where I'm starting to buy stock in Liam Cohen and what he is able to do. And so that's kind of my vein of thought is I'm not ready to sit here and say Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback, but it's hard to argue it from a numbers perspective. And for all those who are out there, box score watching, it's hard to argue that. But the Jaguars to me very much feel like they're going to go to the playoffs. I think that's a foregone conclusion at this point, but they feel almost like a one and done team in the playoffs. I'm not still bought in on the Jaguars being an elite team, but to be quite honest with you, there are a lot of teams this year specifically in the NFL that kind of feel that way to me, where I'm not sure what they are, and I don't really believe in them as a talent, but somebody has to go to the Super Bowl. And I don't think it's going to be the Jaguars. I think we're going to see them. I think that they're going to go to the playoffs, as I mentioned. But after that, I wouldn't be surprised if they get knocked out in the second round. That's kind of where I see this Jaguars team. So with that being said, I still want to touch on this game just a little bit more. The Parker Washington breakout certainly came to fruition. I think a large part of this was due to his 145-yard touchdown, career high explosion that he had this week on just 6 catches. And really the play was he had a 63-yard catch and run in the third quarter. That was the play that really kind of effectively broke this game open and gave the Jaguars, that opportunity to win this game. But Jacoby Myers, they signed him to a 3-year extension after trading for him with the Raiders this year and a couple weeks prior. We haven't seen, Travis Hunter has been out for the majority of the season with injury. And from an offensive perspective, because he should have been the hero of this team, the guy who was that wide receiver one, and we saw his breakout at the end of last year. But you can put an asterisk there because it was with Mac Jones. And Brian Thomas Jr. looks afraid to catch the ball. He looks at times or disinterested, and maybe Trevor Lawrence is throwing him some hospital balls. But the fact that Parker Washington is doing what he has done this season is really, really great. And obviously this game kind of speaks for itself from a box score perspective. But is Parker Washington part of the long-term future? No, I don't think he is, as far as you can consistently count on him for all you fantasy football players out there. Where I see this is, they're just banged up. They're missing some wide receiver help, and he's a good ancillary wide receiver 3 that I think they can count on. From the Denver side of the ball, or the Broncos side of the ball, this was a red zone failure. Coming into this game, Denver had the NFL best for red zone defense. Jacksonville laughed at that stat. They went 4 for 5 on red zone touchdowns. And conversely, the Jaguars defense forced a crucial Bo Nix fumble and a late Jerry Jones interception to keep Denver from ever mounting a real comeback. And from Denver's perspective, that was where I had the qualms for Denver, is Bo Nix and his consistency. And for both these quarterbacks, that's really where I had a lot of questions, is what are they? What are they not? And I haven't seen consistency from either of these quarterbacks all year. And the same thing applies for that Bo Nix conversation that we're about to have, is I haven't seen that consistency. Yes, Denver has been winning games, but for anybody who's not been paying attention to Denver, the heart and soul of this team is on this defense. And I think that Denver's fans would agree with that. Bo Nix, just the consistency isn't there. He's getting it done at the very end of games most times, but I haven't seen him be able to play all 4 quarters. And you can make the argument that he doesn't have a lot of talents on the offensive side of the ball, and I think that's a fair argument. But that's, looking at both these teams, it would not surprise me if they make it to the second round and they get bounced. And that's kind of how I feel about Denver too, because of their offense. And I think we got to see some of that in this game. As far as playoff implications are concerned for both Denver and the Jaguars are 11-4. They now have won 6 straight games and are just 1 game behind Denver and New England for the number 1 overall seed. And the Broncos, who are 12-3, they still hold the number 1 seed due to tiebreakers, but the aura of that invincibility of what Denver is gone. They face the Chiefs and the Chargers to close out the year, and suddenly that first round bye, I think the Chiefs, they're probably going to beat the Chiefs at this point. Chargers get interesting, and it's not a complete lock. So, and then injuries in this game. The Broncos lost wide receiver Pat Bryant. He was carted off the field in a late 4th quarter after a heavy hit. So just keep an eye on that. He's a key piece of that vertical threat, which you can use vertical threat with air quotes. But they did lose Pat Bryant in this one, and we'll see where he's at in the weeks to come. Now, we're going to go over to the Motor City Meltdown. This game was there were a lot of really good games this week, and this is certainly one of them. Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Lions. The Steelers win this game 29-24, but really this game will be remembered for its final 10 seconds. I mean, that's what it is. But for the first 59 minutes of this game, it was just a physical beatdown by the Steelers that really kind of just exposed this Lions front 7. And that really, to be quite transparent, I was a big, and I am a big fan of Dan Campbell, but watching this Lions team this year, that was where I had a lot of concerns for this Lions team, was their offensive line. They lost Frank Ragnow before the season started. He had retired, and that was kind of, he was I want to say it was an all-pro center. And that, they lost Ben Johnson as their offensive mind, and we'll get to that Bears game and talk about kind of maybe some of the correlation there between the success that the Bears are having and the lack of success that the Lions are having. But their front 7 really got exposed. So, or their front 5, got exposed a little bit in this game. And you can see that throughout the entirety of the year. The Lions, when you can fluster Jared Goff and really beat that offensive line, that's really when things, for me, you start to see some of that breakdown. So, obviously, as I mentioned, the Motor City Meltdown is what everybody's calling this game, and for good reason. There was no time left on the clock. For anybody who didn't see this game, I'll give you a little bit of a recap. So, Jared Goff, he had hit Amon-Ra St. Brown, who then he was like on the 1 yard line, was pushing to fight in to get into the end zone for that touchdown to win this thing. And then he had 2 defenders on him, and I don't want to say he lateraled the ball back, but it looks like they kind of stripped the ball. Ball went up in the air. Jared Goff grabbed it and ran into the end zone for really what appeared to be like a miraculous walk-off win. However, it was all wiped away by an OPI call on St. Brown because he pushed off against Jalen Ramsey before the catch. And if you watch this, I don't think it was there. You could see it. And when he pushed off against Jalen Ramsey kind of threw his hands back and was getting pushed back, which is tough because you want to let the players play. And from a fan's perspective, and somebody who had no skin in this game, you want to see the players play. And I didn't think it was overtly egregious, but it certainly, it was there and you could see it, and it really sucked. So the rule controversy, per the NFL rules, an offensive penalty on a play where time expires effectively ends the game. There is no untimed down for the offense. And really, this effectively ended that Lions comeback where they could have won this game and also potentially ruined their season. Jaylen Warren in this game, he was absolutely dominant. You know, the refs really took the headlines for this entire game. Jaylen Warren took the Lions' lunch money, man. He finished with 143 yards on 14 carries, including 2 separate 45-yard touchdown runs. The Steelers outrushed the Lions 230-15, which for a Dan Campbell coach team was something I was not expecting. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, you have David Montgomery. While you don't have Frank Ragnow, you still have what many presume to be as a very great offensive line. So to only get 15 yards rushing in this, that's where, you know, from the Steelers exposing the Lions really came to play is they outmatched them from a running perspective, and it certainly showed. And that's not prototypical of a Dan Campbell offense with the talent that he has on this team. Not only that, and obviously the ending is what everybody's talking about, but the other thing that everybody's talking about is the DK Metcalf incident. So keep an eye on the league office this week, ladies and gentlemen, because after a play on the sideline, Steelers wide receiver DK Metcalf was seen punching a Lions fan's wig off. And it looked like, I went back and watched this. I was watching it live and was like, holy crap. And, you know, all of the broadcasters in this game were talking about this and showing this. It looked like DK had kind of tried to swipe at the guy's face maybe, but he was wearing a really long wig. And it ended up being kind of a physical altercation. DK was on the sidelines and the fan was in the stands kind of leaning over. DK, he wasn't ejected, but a massive fine or a suspension is probably coming for DK Metcalf, which is unfortunate because, and you really think about this, the Steelers, they moved on from old Georgie Pickens, and it was a lot of people, especially after George Pickens' season this year, were kind of like, why in the hell did the Steelers do that? Well, a large part of that was rumored to be because of the locker room drama, and the Steelers year over year typically have found themselves in pickles where their wide receivers are kind of prima donnas and are really in the headlines. So they go out and they get DK Metcalf this offseason for this, in the fan, there's a lot of allegations going on about what was said, because that's what set DK Metcalf off. The Lions fan said that he was just saying DK's full name, which is, and I didn't know this, was DeKalin Zacharias Metcalf. And that's what set DK Metcalf off, supposedly. I'm not buying that. And DK Metcalf, he claims this morning that the fan was actually saying racial slurs and stuff about his mom. And I think that probably holds a little bit more ground. I don't think as fans, we probably shouldn't be saying those things. I mean, let's just be a decent human being. I get it. It's football. You want to try and get in the mind of players and throw them off their game. There's just no room for it. And it's really quite disgusting, to be honest with you. So I kind of lean more in the camp of, if an NFL player is going to get that heated, you're probably not saying his first name. That's bullshit. But I think that I'm interested to see what happens here, because on the same vein, regardless of what's being said, you have to keep your composure. And for DK Metcalf to not keep his composure certainly hurt the team and will probably hurt him in the coming weeks, financially or otherwise. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. I'm kind of in the vein of DK Metcalf is probably telling the truth and not the fan, because if you could say my first name as much as you want, I don't give a shit, and I'm not going to take a swipe at you on the sideline. So that to me doesn't hold ground. I think that fan is a liar, and he should probably face some punishment too. So we'll see what happens. But moving on in this game, Kenneth Gainwell, he had a ghost touchdown. Earlier in the game, he had a 45-yard catch and run that was initially ruled incomplete. Steelers challenged it, and it was overturned and proved to be the point differential in this game that ultimately helped the Steelers win this game. Now, as far as the playoff implications are concerned, the Steelers are 9-6, and they now have a 2-game lead over the Ravens in the AFC North and can clinch the division as early as next week. The Lions are on life support, however, which is kind of a far cry. Looking at the NFC North, both myself and my co-hosts who are not here today kind of had the Lions as the upper echelon team in the NFC North, and that is not coming to fruition, ladies and gentlemen, at least not this season, because they're on life support. They now need to win out and hope that the Packers lose out just to sniff a wild card spot. So the likelihood that the Lions are going to the playoffs this year is dwindling into nothing, which sucks, because I think the Lions are a really fun team. But there's another really fun team here that we're going to discuss, that being the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. So this game, another electric game. There was so many great games, and this is definitely one of them. So the Chicago Bears win 22-16 in overtime, and this was a classic cardiac Bears performance, because Chicago trailed 16-6 with under 2 minutes left in regulation, only to pull off one of the most improbable comebacks in the history of this rivalry. And I have friends who are Bears fans. MK, who is one of the team members here on Leather Brains, is a huge Bears fan. And we had said on this show at the beginning of the year, we're a Bears podcast this season, so we're rooting for the Bears. So was certainly doing so. Vegas also had the Bears winning this by a 1.5 point differential, I believe. So, God, what a great game this was. And really, this was a 2-minute drill masterclass by Ben Johnson and both Caleb Williams. They were down 10 points with 1 minute and 59 seconds left on the clock, and the Bears scored 10 points in 95 seconds. See, it does not get much better than this. And Caro Santos nailed a 43-yard field goal to make it 16-9. And then the onside kick is really when things got freaking fun. So Josh Blackwell, he recovered the onside kick after Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs failed to corral it in. And this was a massive special teams blunder for Green Bay. Most often, onside kicks do not work, but when they do, and they are this impactful to a game, you are glued to the seat, and I know I was. And then, Caleb Williams, he orchestrated a 53-yard drive, capped it off with a 6-yard touchdown to Jade Walker on 4th and 4 with just 24 seconds left to force overtime. And a lot of people are saying, who in the hell is Jade Walker? Where's Rome Odunze? Where's Luther Burden? Jade Walker, he was an undrafted rookie. And both Odunze and Burden were out on injury this week. And so for him to trust an undrafted rookie in the biggest moment of this game, you got to give hats off to both Williams and Walker, because this is effectively what obviously let them win the game. And I do not want to underscore Caleb Williams, because he played a hell of a game. He went 19 for 34 for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. While the stats, they look solid, it's really the timing that matters, because both of his touchdowns came on the Bears' final 2 possessions of the game. He now has the second highest touchdown to interception ratio of any quarterback with 500 attempts since the NFL merger, trailing only behind the man who does, in fact, own the Chicago Bears, being Aaron Rodgers. So Jordan Love got hurt in this game, and I think that's also Packers fans are looking at this and saying, this game doesn't count. Jordan Love got hurt. Malik Willis was in. This game doesn't count. It counts. This game counts. All games count. And because of the playoff picture and the implication here, this is a huge loss for the Packers. And Jordan Love, he's in concussion protocol. It was in the second quarter following a helmet-to-helmet hit. And Malik Willis, he played really well. He went 9 for 11 for 121 yards and a touchdown. But he did fumble a snap on a 4th and 1 in overtime, gave the ball back to Chicago, and ended up that game-winning drive for Chicago. So, in overtime, I was firmly glued to the seat. I know anybody who is a Bears or Packers fans was watching this very diligently. Caleb Williams, he took a deep shot on a play action, absolute beauty. He found DJ Moore for a 46-yard walk-off touchdown. It was the longest walk-off touchdown for the Bears in over 35 years. Absolutely crazy. And then, the Bears defense were really the unsung heroes of this game. And yes, they didn't have Jordan Love for a large majority of it, but they held Green Bay to 0 touchdowns on 5 red zone possessions. They're starting to look like the Broncos a little bit here. The Packers' red zone trips resulted in 3 field goals, a fumble, and a turnover on downs. So what's the playoff implications? That's what everybody wants to know. So Slapdog's going to give it to you right now. Bears are 11-4. They have moved into the number 2 seed in the NFC and hold a 1.5 game lead in the NFC North. They will officially be going to the playoffs with a bare minimum a wild card spot. And we're going to see how this plays out in the next 2 weeks. But the Bears are going, bear down, baby. The Bears are going to the playoffs. They are, I'm surprised. In Ben Johnson, you got to talk about Ben Johnson. What he has come in here and done for this Bears team, he's given Bears fans hope. He has instilled a sense of winning with this locker room, which prior coaching staffs I don't think ever did, and I think that shows. Matt Nagy, not a good head coach, not a good offensive coordinator, should probably get fired for the Chiefs. Couldn't get, I think they had one playoff berth with him, and then you had the other Matt, whose last name is currently escaping me, that Eberflus. The Bears should have fired him last year. I think everybody was kind of in agreement there, and they didn't. And it's always hindsight in 2020, because I think it's working out for the Bears okay. And you see Ben Johnson, what he's done with this team, what they are doing right now. the Bears could be kind of one of those teams that we're watching a dynasty start to unfold here for them. And I've even seen rumors that they're going to lock Caleb Williams up to a very long contract that's in the ballpark of $800 and something million, which is kind of what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. And if you get, I know we joke about cap space all the time here on this show. If you get in front of it early and you are able to pay your guys before the very end of their contract, typically, if they're the guy, it's really beneficial for your cap space, because the cap space, as we all know, it only goes up, right? And when you can lock that young guy down earlier, and then the price for quarterbacks continues to climb, well, you saved yourself some money there. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. And do they sign Caleb Williams after this season? Do they let it roll into next season and then sign him? But the price is only going to go up. And if you really believe in Caleb Williams as the future of your franchise, locking him up right now isn't that bad of a deal. And Johnson, I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the Lions. You've seen them struggle a little bit more offensively, and you've seen the Bears come out and be able to get it done. And I think two things can be true at once. Yes, I mentioned Frank Ragnow. They lost their all-pro center, but they also lost their offensive coordinator. And a lot of people were very curious before the season started to see, how does this Lions teams look without Ben Johnson in the fold? And does he really play that big of an impact, or is this more Dan Campbell running the show and steering the ship? I think Ben Johnson definitely plays a huge part in why the Lions were finding success. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to do so in years moving forward, but it's just a testament to his ability as a coach. And you're seeing it come to fruition here. And so, and then back to the playoff implications, let's talk about the Packers here. They're not 9-5-1. This loss was a devastating blow for them. They now need to beat the Ravens next week, also potentially without Jordan Love because of that concussion protocol, just to keep their division title hopes alive. So the Sunday night game, it was a heavyweight fight that shifted the entirety on really just a singular injury. And, it wasn't just a loss for the Ravens. It was a potential season-altering move for the entire AFC North. So great game. Love to see it. And now we're going to move over to the Patriots and the Ravens. Another really great game, ladies and gentlemen, and a game that I didn't get up off my couch all Sunday, Saturday. I was firmly glued to the couch. And the nice thing is with Christmas right around the corner here this week, we get football earlier. And for those who are in the fantasy football playoffs who are going, everybody's going to be glued to the couch. And so this game was no different. The Patriots won 28-24 against the Ravens. And the Patriots, they secured their spot in the playoff with quarter comeback. And, the Ravens, they really left M&T Bank Stadium with more questions than answers, at least from my perspective. So let's talk about it. It's an injury. That's the story of this game. Late in the second quarter, Lamar went down with a back injury after a run, and he looked visibly uncomfortable. He was taken to the locker room and then was ruled out early in the second half. This is his second major injury stint of this year. He missed 3 games earlier with a hamstring injury this season. Offense, they really just look very out of rhythm without Lamar Jackson, which is understandable, right? He's an MVP quarterback. He is a multi-MVP winning quarterback. When you lose him, your team probably starts to get a little questionable on if you're going to be able to have that rhythm. So Drake May, though, what an MVP for this second-year quarterback. He had the second best game of his career on arguably the biggest stage this season. May finished with 80 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and that included a surgical in the fourth quarter to take the lead. He dueled out a defense that had been top 5 all season. His first ever fourth quarter comeback. Zay Flowers, minutes left and the Ravens driving to win. Zay Flowers had the ball punched out after a catch, dagger of a turnover that ended the comeback attempt. And before that, Flowers had been really only the lone. He scored an 18-yard touchdown run that briefly gave Baltimore the lead. So that really cost the Ravens. But Zay Flowers really isn't the talking point here for me. It's really Derrick Henry and conversation. And I know even just over on our Leather Brains social accounts, we were posting today, should Harbaugh be in the hot seat? And that's a huge topic of conversation within the NFL space because of Derrick Henry. And, with Lamar Jackson out, the Ravens, they leaned on the King Henry, who finished with 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have a costly fumble in the first half that allowed the Patriots to stay in this game early. But after the first half, Derrick vanished. And, Derrick Henry, we call him the King for good reason, because he is, So you see, yeah, the line looks great, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he had 18 carries for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, he did not single time after his second touchdown with 12 minutes and 50 seconds left in the fourth. That's really the thing that gets interesting for me because, I mean, he was averaging 7.1 yards per carry. And, you know, post-game, John Harbaugh, he admitted that they kept Henry on the sideline during the game deciding drives due to their running back rotation. Instead of riding this Hall of Fame that already had 128 yards, they turned to Keaton Mitchell, the backup, for this drive that really stalled out. That I don't understand. And from a coaching, are you afraid he's going to fumble the ball? Are you afraid that, you know, he needs showed Baltimore blew an 11 while their best player watched from the bench. And yes, Lamar Jackson's out there. Reason to have Derrick Henry come out there and play the freaking game, because if you're going to lose Lamar Jackson, you need in there to try and win this. And Harbaugh even later admitted, looking back, would I rather have had Derrick starting the drive? Yes. Why you didn't is a complete fumble from a coaching perspective that I genuinely don't understand. And that's why Harbaugh's getting a lot of flack right now, as he should, because who knows what would have happened had you had the King out there versus Keaton Mitchell. And then as far as the playoff implications are concerned, the Patriots, they're now 12-3. They have officially clinched a playoff spot and are currently tied for the best record in the AFC. Mike Vrabel has taken a 4-win team to the postseason in his first year as a head coach. I was talking about, you know, the Bears in a potential dynasty that we're seeing potentially on the horizon. I don't even want to say potential for the Patriots, because I said this earlier on in the season, and I really do it. What we're seeing from the Patriots this year is the start of a dynasty. I really do firmly believe that. Mike Vrabel is a proven great head coach. And if you look at the Patriots from an off perspective, they still lack quite a bit of talent, in my opinion. And they're starting to get some pieces, you know, Travion Henderson namely, but like Drake May is really stepped. I believe that we're going to see another Patriots dynasty on the horizon as early as next year. And we're going to start talking about that we do the Bengals and the Ravens and the Chiefs, where they're always in that conversation. I think they're bad. Unfortunate truth. And then on the other side, the Ravens, they're 7-8, and this loss was absolutely devastating. They games behind the Steelers. Their playoff hopes now depend entirely on Lamar's health and winning their final games this season. So to be quite honest, I don't see the Ravens getting in at this point. I think it's over for them, unfortunately. But the Patriots, they're going to the playoffs, baby. And now the Eagles Commanders. The Eagles win this game 29-18. Nobody's shocked that the Eagles won this game. This was the night the NFC East chaos had finally ended. By beating Washington, the Eagles became the first team in 21 seasons to win back-to-back NFC East titles. Who did it before them? Well, it was the 2001 to 2004 Eagles. So they know a thing or two about the East titles, but this is the first time in 21 seasons. That is absolutely insane. And I don't think anybody's surprised. NFC East, you know, the Eagles, they just won the Super Bowl last year. They really just reloaded. Throughout the season, the Eagles have looked very gettable, and I still think that they are a gettable team. The Commanders, they didn't have Jaden Daniels, and they still put up 18 points. And yes, the Eagles 9-18, but the Eagles still feel like a gettable team to me, and I really do think it's largely due to the offensive coordinator and the lack of scheming that they're doing. But you can't argue that the talent's not there for this Eagles. And they won. They're the first team in 21 seasons to carry back-to-back NFC East titles. So congratulations. As far as the game is concerned, it wasn't a pretty start. And in fact, the Eagles halftime after Jake Elliott missed not one, not two, but 3 field goals. However, they came out of the tunnel in the second half and scored 22 on 8. You know, when I was mentioning, I think the Eagles are gettable. With a Marcus Mariota-led Commanders team, for them to be trail time, they're gettable. And yes, they came out and they show, you know, they ended up getting it done. But I have a lot of concerns for this Eagles team. I really do, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. And it's so I wouldn't be surprised. Eagles fans, you're going to hate to hear this, but I don't think you're going to the Super Bowl this year. And anything can happen when we get to the dance, and the Eagles are going to the dance, but I'm just not sold on this Eagles team. It is also worth mentioning Saquon Barkley was the engine. He finished with 132 rushing yards and a touchdown, officially eclipsing that 1,000-yard mark for the season. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be there weeks ago, but he ended up making it, and his highlight of the night was a 48-yard, essentially like a video game run, where he spun out of a tackle in the backfield and set up a clinching score there. So tush push needs to be discussed because the Eagles are the best in the NFL at it, but a brawl actually had boiled out because of the tush push. So Tank Bigsby scored to put the Eagles up 17. Philadelphia went for a 2-point conversion. A massive brawl broke out that resulted in not one, not two, but 3 ejections. The Eagles right guard Tyler Steen and 2 Commanders defensive players, both Quan Martin and Javon Kinlaw, all 3 were ejected because of this brawl. Look, I love a good brawl. You got to keep a level head, and now that's going to affect the Commanders already out, so I guess it doesn't matter. But with the Eagles missing a right guard now because of the ejection, it gets interesting. As far as the playoff implications are concerned, Eagles at 10-5 are the NFC East champions, as I mentioned. They currently hold the number 3 seed, and they have a date with the Bills next week. And to be quite honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills won this game. This is kind of a coin flip game for me. I'm going to be watching it closely this upcoming week. But the Eagles are gettable this year, and I think the Bills could end up getting the job done. But it doesn't matter because the Eagles are going to the playoffs, so congratulations to them. Commanders, I don't think anybody was holding off hope that they were going to make it. They are officially eliminated. Marcus Mariota did also leave this game with a hand injury / concussion evaluation and did not return. So, Commanders, we'll see you next season. You've got a top pick. We'll see what you do with it. But you need to get a little bit younger, and I think this season really showcased that. I mentioned the Bills. Let's move over to them. The Bills won against the Browns 23-20. And to be very transparent, ladies and gentlemen, this game was much closer than the record suggested. However, Josh Allen, he rewrote the NFL history books in this game, and that's really why I want to talk about this game, because Josh Allen threw his 300th touchdown pass. He became the fastest player in NFL history to reach 300 total offensive touchdowns between both passing and rushing combined. He reached this milestone in just his 127th career game, beating the previous record held by none other than Patrick Mahomes, who did it in 128 games. He is also the first player ever to hit 300 before the age of 30. Josh Allen's better than Patrick Mahomes. That's basically what this stat means. So if you don't believe that, just look at this. Look at the NFL history books, because Josh Allen just did it. But it wasn't just Josh Allen in this game. I mean, James Cook, he was the workhorse. Josh Allen got the record. James Cook, he really got the win here, ladies and gentlemen. He was this game's MVP. He racked up 138 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on 22 carries. Buffalo's commitment to the run this year is what kept them alive, while the Browns defense really sold out to stop Josh Allen. And they're averaging 5.6 yards per carry. So the really interesting thing for me is really seeing the Bills really a large majority of the season, and I don't have the stat in front of me, but if you watch these games, are really running a 12 personnel, meaning they've got tight ends on the field quite often. It's interesting because over the years, we've seen Josh Allen play a lot of hero ball. He's had to really, be that gunslinger that's willing to lower his shoulder and get the first down. And the Bills are being much more protective of him this season, which I think is smart. He's obviously their franchise quarterback. He is the upper echelon of the talent at the quarterback position. But the Bills have really changed their scheming this year in a big way. And, they signed James Cook to an extension this offseason, and it's really coming to fruition for them as far as what he's been able to do for them on the field. They really have changed their emphasis of the game. And I think part of it really is largely due to the talent that they have on this roster. Keon Coleman, another healthy scratch. He's been a healthy scratch, coaching decision to be benched in multiple games now. He was our first-round draft pick, a year ago, 2 years ago, from the wide receiver position. They struggle. They don't have any, upper echelon talented wide receivers, and they're getting their tight ends involved. They're playing this dink and dunk game, and they're focusing on the run game. I've been really impressed with McDermott as a head coach's ability to kind of re-scheme the offense based on the talent that they have versus trying to force it because you have Josh Allen. The Bills look gettable. I mean, they do. The Browns almost won this game with Shedeur Sanders, and that's, he nearly pulled off this upset. He led a late drive, got Cleveland into the red zone, and it stalled out due to a sack and an intentional grounding penalty that forced a 3rd and 32. It was rough to watch. And then Myles Garrett, I mean, he recorded a half sack, bringing his season total to 22. He's still got 2 games, and he is just half a sack away from breaking the all-time single season record, which is at 22 and a half. He'll be chasing that record next week against the Steelers. He can get one on Aaron Rodgers. He now will break a record in the NFL. It sucks. I'm so sad to see the talent that is Myles Garrett being wasted away on the Browns. He's my favorite NFL or defensive player in the NFL, and to see his talent being squandered by this Browns organization just sucks. But I think he kind of proved when he signed that deal that money talks, and he's maybe more interested in money than winning a ring, which is unfortunate. The other unfortunate thing in this game was Quinshon Judkins. He suffered a significant leg injury in the second quarter. He had to get carted off the field, and it is being mentioned that he broke his leg, meaning that not only is his next season now in question with how late it is in this season, but does he come back as the same player? Because, I mean, tearing an ACL that is catastrophic. That is changing for the player, but breaking a leg is even crazier as far as the ability to come back and play at a high level. And Nick Chubb, namely, is one that comes to mind, another Browns running back that is now with the Texans that broke his leg a few years ago. Everybody thought his career was over. His career definitely hasn't looked the same. And you can make the argument that he's getting older. He's changed teams. He doesn't have that talent that he did maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But a player can look different. And to see the rookie running back that has really came onto the scene this year break his leg in this game was tough to watch. So I prayers go up for him. The Brown season is obviously very much over, and the Bills are they're a fun one. They're a fun team this season. So another team that is fun this year that I don't think anybody expected to be fun is the Carolina Panthers. They beat the Bucks 23-20, and this was a classic divisional rock fight with massive stakes. By winning this game, the Panthers, who are 8-7, have now officially taken control of the NFC South, which everybody had going into the season. Every single person you talked to said it was going to be the Panthers, and that is not me being sarcastic at all. I'm surprised. I'm very surprised because I think the Bucks on paper are the best team in the NFC South. And before their bye week, I don't think anybody was going to argue that. And the Panthers still are kind of a head scratching, winner or leading the division of the NFC South. And I was like, what is going on here? Because I don't really believe in the Panthers, but I really don't believe in any team in the NFC South. And so it's a very gettable division. And the Panthers very obviously 8-7 who are leading the division. I think that really showcases that this is a very gettable division. And really, this boils down to Bryce Young's growth for me. Young had 3 game-defining clutch moments, which included a perfectly placed touchdown to Teteroa McMillan and a late third-quarter scramble drill touchdown to Jatavian Sanders. Scotty, one of the co-hosts here, our producer, who is not with us because I'm alone today, has a theory about Bryce Young. And his theory is that when Bryce Young has high expectations, he folds. But when there are no expectations for Bryce Young, he typically rises up to the occasion. I didn't have a lot of expectations for him in this game, but this was a high impact game for the playoff picture, and he came in and he got it done. And he now has 12 career game-winning drives. That is the second most for any quarterback before the age of 25 in NFL history. The person who owned that record previously was Justin Herbert at 13. So it's interesting what Dave Canales, the head coach here for the Panthers, is really doing with this team. They're a team that could be on the ups. I'm not necessarily sold on Bryce Young as far as his talent perspective, and the Panthers are going to have to start having, and I'm sure they already are behind closed doors, figure out what they're going to do with the future of this franchise. Is Bryce Young going to be the future of this franchise? If he keeps playing like this, I think he will be. But from a talent perspective, they're going to have to sign him to big money. And you've seen teams over the years do that. Trevor Lawrence is one that comes to mind. Do they do it? Should they do it? And that's something that I'm not sold on it. I don't know if they should, because now if he continues to play like this, and he continues to play very well next season, then obviously that conversation changes. But we've seen him over the last few years not be able to get done. It's going to be something to watch. And as far as this game is concerned, the win and in scenario, because the Panthers won, they now just need one more win or have Tampa lose to clinch the. If Tampa wins next week and the Panthers lose, They have a rematch in week 18. That will be for the division title, and it will be a must-watch game. Typically in week 18, when teams already have their playoffs clinched, they will rest their starters. There's a very real chance that the Panthers and Bucks are going to be starting everybody, and there are playoff aspirations for both of these teams. And the last thing here is the demise of this Bucks team really just needs to be studied, because the Bucks had all their wide receivers going in this one, and Baker, after the bye that the Bucks had this season, have just really looked like they're slipping. And I don't understand exactly what it is, because Baker Mayfield was on a freaking heater to start the year. He looked great last year. He looks a little frazzled. And it looks like he was forcing Mike Evans the ball quite often, which is understandable because Mike Evans is an elite Hall of Fame wide receiver from a talent perspective. But I really don't understand how the Bucks have slipped this far, because if you would have asked me midway through the season where I see the Bucks at, they're going to take this division by storm. The NFC South is gettable, and they're getting got. So definitely something to watch here in these coming weeks for both the Bucks and the Panthers, because somebody has to win this damn division, and it's still up in the air. All right, let's pivot over. Let's do Texans and Raiders. The Texans win this game 23-21, and this game was really the definition of a trap game that the Texans very narrowly escaped. While Houston extended their winning streak to 7 games, which is their longest since 2018, the vibe in the locker room was more of probably relief than celebration, because they almost lost to the Raiders. And despite this win, their star edge rusher, Will Anderson Jr., he had voiced frustrations after the game, stating that while the win is beautiful, the team didn't play to their standard. And the Texans, who have the top-ranked defense, allowed 21 points to a 2-win Raiders team that had only managed 75 total offensive yards just last week. And a large part of that, Ashton Jeanty, he had a record-breaking day, man. The Raiders' rookie running back was the best player on the field. Jeanty finished with 188 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns, had a staggering 60-yard touchdown and a 51-yard touchdown run that nearly pulled this upset off. His 188 yards are the second most by a Raiders rookie in franchise history, trailing only behind one man by the name of Mr. Bo Jackson. What a freaking week for Ashton Jeanty. And then, Derek Singletary Jr. set the tone early. He had a 31-yard pick six in the first quarter, jumped a Geno Smith pass intended for Jeanty. It was Stingley's first career interception return for a touchdown, and really provided that early cushion that Houston actually desperately needed in order to win this one. But it wasn't just him. C.J. Stroud's efficiency. He had his most explosive game, 187. It wasn't his most explosive game, excuse me. He had 187 yards and 1 touchdown, but he was clinical when it mattered. He sealed the game with a 23-yard dime of a ball to Nico Collins on a crucial 3rd and 20 that really allowed Houston to run out the clock, and he also found Dalton Schultz for a 1-yard score in the 4th quarter to regain the lead. And then the Nick Chubb spark. He made his presence felt in this one. He broke off a 30-yard run, his longest since 2022, proving that, he is older. I mentioned his broken leg from years past. He's finding some form in order to get this team hopefully into the playoffs with a playoff berth here. And that's what's next. So the Texans, they are 10-5. They stay hot with a 7-game win streak, but they remain 1 game behind the Jaguars in the AFC South race. They are currently locked into a wild card spot, but they still have a path to be able to potentially get the division title if they can run over the Jags. And then the Raiders, they're 2-13. Their losing streak extends to 9 games this season, and despite the grit shown under Pete Carroll in this one, they are firmly in the hunt for the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft. And I want to spend a moment talking about this, because this is something that is kind of interesting. And I have a theory that I want to go over with all you dirty, nasty brainiacs. So let's talk about the draft order. Both the Giants and the Raiders are currently fighting for the first overall pick in the upcoming draft, and they are both 2-12. The Raiders, and this is me presuming a little bit, but obviously both teams want the 101. The Raiders desperately want that 101 to give them a chance at drafting probably a quarterback, and that quarterback probably being Mendoza. If the Giants end up with the 101, they're not taking a quarterback. They just drafted Jaxson Dart last year, and they potentially can sell their pick to the highest bidder. Meaning that if the Raiders play the Giants, and they do play, they both really just want to lose their game for the pick seeding, because if the Giants get that pick, another team that is quarterback needy can come calling, and the Raiders now miss out on their quarterback. And that's how close this is to getting screwed up for the Raiders. Is if the Raiders end up beating the Giants, there's a very real probability that they just beat themselves out of being able to draft Mendoza unless they want to pay high for it, which teams are going to be calling the Giants in the event that they have that 101. And, my theory is, we always say that the teams are never going to admit to tanking. Like, they're never going to say that they're tanking. They're never going to be adamant that is the case. And largely, I believe that to be true, because players are playing for contracts. They're playing for future contracts. They're playing for, guaranteed money if they hit certain different objectives within their contracts. So players aren't going to say that they're tanking, but it's real. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an argument to be made that the Giants are legitimately tanking, and that is what the Giants general management has asked their interim head coach to do. And I'm not going to talk about the Giants. I'm not going to give a recap on this game, but I want to give a recap as far as the narrative that I think there's a legitimate argument here. Is Jaxson Dart in this Giants game, in his first half, was 1 out of 5 completions for 2 yards in an interception. The net passing yards in the first half for the Giants this last week was -4 yards. And the Giants ran the ball a total of 30 times in this one versus only 13 passing attempts. Mike Kafka, he is the interim head coach for the Giants, really is doing a disservice to Jaxson Dart from a developmental standpoint. And I understand. The Vikings defense are no slouch. The Vikings defense, Brian Flores does a phenomenal job from a scheming perspective to make it very difficult, but let the kid throw the ball. You're not playing for anything. Try and develop him. I think the general management of the Giants is having conversations with Mike Kafka saying, hey, we want you to throw these games because we want the pick so we can try and build around our future, and the season's over. So I don't know if that's going to hold true or not, but I think after seeing that and seeing Jaxson Dart throughout this entire season, I was just scratching my head at this performance from this Giants-Vikings game, and I'm like, what are you doing? It didn't make sense to me. And so I do think there's a little bit of tank watch going on there. All right. Before we continue this, we're going to take a quick time out here. We're halfway through the show. We're a little over halfway through the show. And we've already talked about the Lions getting robbed. We talked about DK Metcalf swinging on fans in the stands, and the Giants offense gaining fewer yards than my nephew's Pee-wee team. Being an NFL fan is stressful. Your blood pressure is high. Your parlay is dead. Your team's GM is currently scouting players who haven't even been born yet. And you can't control the damn refs. You can't control the injuries. But you know what you can control? What's for dinner? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why God invented the Burger King Whopper. Think about it. A Whopper never has a delay of game penalty. A side of mozzarella fries will never drop a wide open touchdown pass. And unlike your team's quarterback, the Krabby Patty Whopper, the SpongeBob one, actually delivers in the clutch. So if your team just broke your heart, go to Burger King, get a double Whopper, some chicken fries, and a Hershey's pie. Build your own winning streak at the drive-thru. Burger King, because at least someone lets you have it your way. Burger King, you rule. Appreciate the sponsor by Burger King and keeping the lights on here at Leather Brains. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's go over to the winners and the losers of this one, because this is the playoff situation that is now firmly in conversation. So, the new blood contenders, the Jaguars and the Bears. Jacksonville and Chicago didn't just win, they bullied the old guard. Jacksonville snapped Denver's 11-game win streak, and the Bears officially took the keys to the NFC North from the Green Bay Packers. Both teams clinched playoff spots and proved that they aren't just happy to be there. They're legitimate threats here as they're coming through. And like I said, I don't know if I believe in the Jaguars. If I was to guess as to which team I believe in more, I would take the Bears over the Jaguars, but they're going to the playoffs, baby. And not just them. The AFC East, Patriots and Bills. It was a historic weekend for this division. The Patriots clinched their first playoff berth of the post-Belichick era, while Josh Allen became the fastest player to 300 touchdowns. Both teams are now 12-3 and 11-4 respectively, making the AFC East arguably the toughest division in football. I don't know if I would I would argue that maybe it's not, but I think there's a legitimate argument. So, and then the Carolina Panthers, they are quietly the biggest winner in the NFC South. And like I said, the NFC South is very gettable. They beat the Bucs 23-20, and they surged into first place. After a midseason that looked really lost, Dave Canales has this team one win away from clinching a home playoff game. Not something I had in my range of outcomes for this Panthers team to start the season. And then the losers. Let's pour one out. The Baltimore Ravens. They are the biggest on-the-field losers of the week. Not only did they lose a crucial game to the Patriots, but the injury to Lamar Jackson has put their entire season now in jeopardy. At 7-8, they are now essentially a win-or-go-home mode for the rest of the year, and it's going to be pretty tough. If they don't have Lamar Jackson, and if Harbaugh is not playing the king like he should, I think the Ravens season is over. To be quite frank, I think the Ravens season is over even if Lamar Jackson does play this week. And then the Detroit Lions. The Lions were the biggest emotional losers of this week. Between that controversial officiating and a defensive performance that allowed 230 rushing yards to Pittsburgh, Detroit's Cinderella story has hit a massive wall. So let's talk about probability for just a moment. After those 2 touchdowns were wiped off the board by the OPI calls, the Lions' playoff probability plummeted. They were at 65% before this game, down to a prayer-based 6% probability chance that the Lions make the playoffs. They have to have a lot of things going their way in these next 2 weeks, and it's not looking great. And then, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. It is official. The dynasty may or may not be on hiatus. With their loss this weekend, and they did lose Gardner Minshew for the rest of the year, the Chiefs have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs between both those injuries. This is the first time in a decade that they won't be playing football in January. So if you're a Chiefs hater, congratulations. If you're a Chiefs fan, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I mean, obviously, yes, Patrick Mahomes tore his knee up, and next season is going to get interesting. But any team that's got Patrick Mahomes under the helm, I think you're still going to feel very comfortable that you're always going to be in the conversation. So, as of this morning, these teams have officially punched their tickets. Denver Broncos and the Patriots in the AFC, and in the NFC, we have the Seahawks, the Eagles, the Bears, the 49ers, and the Rams. I don't see the Cardinals anywhere on there, which is very, very interesting, seeing that as everybody else in that division, it made it. So what happened to the Cardinals? I'm not too sure. All right, let's go to Monday Night Football preview, and then we're going to get the heck out of here. So I appreciate anybody once again who's tuned in. If you have any comments you want to leave over on YouTube or X, put your comments in the video. Let's have a conversation. I want to talk shop with all you dirty old nasty freaks out there. So come talk football with me. I would love to do so. But until you come leave those comments, if you come leave those comments, I'm going to be talking the Monday Night Football preview, which happens tonight. It is the San Francisco 49ers, who are currently sitting at 10-4 versus the Indianapolis Colts at 8-6. This game is in Indianapolis, and here's the storylines to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. It is the return of Grandpa Rivers, Mr. Philip Rivers, in the most NFL 2025 storyline possible. 44-year-old grandfather, quarterback, Philip Rivers is making his second start for the Colts after coming out of retirement just last week to replace the injured Daniel Jones. He nearly upset the Seahawks last week, and now he's looking for his first win in 5 years. Is he a miracle worker, or will the 49ers pass rush finally be able to show Philip Rivers' age? And I think Philip Rivers is certainly showing his age on his own. I don't think he can throw the ball over 30 yards. So interested to see. I think Jonathan Taylor will be a focal point in this one. But the 49ers NFC West hunt, despite the 49ers have really, it's been very sad. They have been plagued with injuries, but they've been quietly just chugging along and still finding ways to win games. And you got to give a huge shout out to Kyle Shanahan for keeping this 49ers team rolling. They have officially clinched a playoff spot yesterday, thanks to the results from around the league as far as how those games had transpired. But the 49ers, we all know Kyle Shanahan is not satisfied. A win tonight keeps them in the hunt for the NFC West title and potentially the number 1 overall seed if they can beat the Seahawks in Week 18 and continue the winning that they've done the majority of the season. Now, this game has massive implications for teams not even on the field because it's winning in for a couple AFC teams. So if the Colts lose tonight, the Jaguars, Bills, and Chargers all officially clinch their playoff berths. The entire AFC is basically rooting for 49ers tonight. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is Jonathan Taylor. This is his game versus the San Francisco front defensive line, because the Colts' only real path to victory is really keeping Rivers, playing like he did last week and really feeding Jonathan Taylor. The 49ers defense has been stout, but they have shown cracks against very elite rushers, and Jonathan Taylor is one of those. So that's really what I'm going to be watching for in this game. It is also worth noting the 49ers are 5.5 point favorites with an over-under in this game set to 45.5. I'm taking the 49ers here. I saw Phillip Rivers play last week. It looked like there were a lot of things that were not going right for them. And Kyle Shanahan is a hell of a coach, and I really do expect him to come in and just work the Colts on this one and get it done. So I'm rolling the Vegas line on here. Now 5.5 point favorites, I'll take it. You got, for all you dirty old degens out there that want to bet, I'll take a 5.5 point favorite. Let's do it. I'll roll with you. That's a slap dog guarantee. 49ers win by over 5.5 points. And that's it. That's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. So week 16 is in the books. We came into this weekend with questions, and we're leaving with a transformed NFL landscape. So whether you're a Jaguars fan that is celebrating the biggest win in a decade, a Lions fan staring at that officiating report in disbelief, or a Giants fan wondering if that first half passing performance was worth the draft position, one thing is certain, ladies and gentlemen: the margin for error has officially hit zero for quite a few of these teams. But as I mentioned, this week is not quite over yet. Tonight, we will be watching Indianapolis. Can the 44-year-old Phillip Rivers pull one more miracle out of his hat to keep the Colts season on life support, or will the 49ers pass rush remind him why he retired in the first place? Remember, as I mentioned, a 49ers win tonight officially punches the playoff ticket for Jaguars, Bills, and Chargers. So for any of those fans out there that are vying for that spot, you are definitely rooting for the 49ers to win tonight, so stay glued to your couch. The entire AFC is really watching this. And then we head next week into a massive Week 17 slate that starts with a Christmas Day triple header, followed by a Saturday showdown where the Ravens and Packers play for their postseason lives. Whew, the playoffs are calling, baby. The pressure is mounting, and we will be right there with you guys to break it all down next week. Thank you for turning into Leather Brains. I hope you enjoyed this solo episode with me, Slapdog, your host. And don't forget to hit subscribe. I'm telling you guys, it really means the world. If you go to your podcast platform of choice, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, hit the subscribe button and then leave a 5-star review. It really genuinely does mean the world to a small and growing podcast such as ourselves. And I enjoyed anybody who tuned in for the entire episode today or just jumped in halfway through and wanted to listen to me talk NFL, because I am oh so passionate about doing so. And let me know. Do you think the Lions were robbed? Let's see. I think that as a Lions pseudo fan, it sucks, but I try and stay true to my word, and there was an OPI call there. So at any rate, we will see you all right back here next week for NFL Week 17. And until then, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. I am out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.